The whole room went silent. Mia Harper stood at 3:22 in the morning in the charred ruins of her apartment on 7th Street, cold rain from the summer thunderstorm soaking through a borrowed coat that smelled like someone else's perfume. She held a single photograph of her late husband Michael. His face was already fading in her memory, which terrified her more than the flames had. Ash stuck to her wet fingers. The smell of burned wood and melted plastic filled her nose until she could taste it on her tongue like metal and death. The firefighters had left an hour ago. She heard them say it at 2:31. Total loss. Those two words meant everything was gone. The crib she'd bought Lucas. Emma's handmade birthday cards dating back 7 years. Michael's wedding ring, which she'd kept on a shelf above the stove, waiting for the day she could afford to have it resized for a daughter she would never have. All of it reduced to ash and smoke and the smell of everything burning. 3 miles away at Sacred Heart Shelter, her children slept in borrowed clothes 2 sizes too big. Emma, age 8, would not stop asking when they could go home. Lucas, age 5, had wet the bed twice since the fire. The shelter's director, a woman named Sister Margaret with tired eyes and hands that shook, had told Mia there was space for 1 more week. 1 more week. The words hung in the air like a prayer no one was listening to anymore. All Mia had in this world was $34 in her pocket. She knew the exact amount because she had counted it 17 times. $34. 17 bills and 4 coins. This was supposed to last 5 days until her next shift at the Venetian Hotel, where she worked as a night shift server, and the manager Harold Brennan took half her tips and smiled when he did it like they were friends. The eviction notice was in her other pocket. The paper had survived the flames. Red ink, a 12-day deadline. How did paper survive fire when everything else burned? How did the law find a way through the smoke? She did not cry. Her tears had dried up somewhere on the drive from the hospital after Michael died 2 years ago. The doctors said his heart just stopped. 36 years old. No warning. No second chance. Just the sound of the monitor flatline and the silence that followed, which was the loudest sound she had ever heard. What Mia did not know was that in exactly 43 hours, she would find a child abandoned in the rain. A boy age 6, trembling and soaked and calling for his father in a voice so broken it would crack something open inside her chest that she thought the grief had sealed shut forever. What she could not have imagined was that this child belonged to Salvatore Conti. The Salvatore Conti. The man who controlled every illegal operation in Los Angeles. The man whose name made grown men flinch. The man who sat in a penthouse bedroom in downtown Los Angeles, in a wheelchair made of titanium and leather, staring at an unopened crib that had been empty for 27 years. She also did not know that Salvatore had been left at his own wedding altar 17 years ago. 300 guests watched in complete silence as he sat in that wheelchair in his custom Italian suit, his bride dissolving into tears, not from joy but from revulsion. He was a monster, she had said later through her lawyer. A broken man who could never be a real husband. The word broken had echoed through every room he entered after that day. 17 years of silence. 17 years of a wound that never healed because he had never let anyone close enough to try. But Mia did not know any of this. Mia knew only the small, concrete facts of her own survival. That the Venetian Hotel expected her to work a double shift in 7 hours. That Sister Margaret needed payment by Friday or the children would have to go to the county facility. That her shoes had a hole in the sole and the rain was soaking through to her socks. She looked down at the photograph of Michael one more time. He was smiling. He had always smiled. Even when the bills came. Even when the doctor gave him antibiotics that didn't work and then said there was nothing more to do. He had smiled and told her that she and the children would be fine. That she was stronger than she knew. Those words had been the cruelest gift he could have left her. The rain fell harder. Thunder cracked somewhere over downtown. The city lights reflected in the puddles at her feet, broken into 1,000 fragments. She walked back toward the street where the Red Line buses ran all night. She had to sleep somewhere before her shift. There was a 24-hour diner called Morrison's 3 blocks from the Venetian where the night manager, a man named Tom who had known her since before Michael died, let her sit in a booth for free if she ordered coffee. She had the money for coffee. Almost. The rain drummed on the buses and the cars and the metal awnings of closed restaurants. The city smelled like wet asphalt and garbage and the faint ghost of jasmine from someone's garden 3 streets over. Everything was so heavy. The air, her coat, her bones, her heart. She did not know that in less than 2 days, everything would splinter open. Now let us go back to the beginning. Let us understand how a widow with nothing would become the only person alive who could reach a man who had trust no one for 17 years. Let us begin on a morning when Mia Harper still believed she was truly invisible. Still believed that people like her did not matter to people like Salvatore Conti. Still believed that kindness was something only the rich could afford to give. 6 months earlier, Mia woke at 4:45 in the morning in the apartment that no longer existed. But she did not know that yet. She did not know that fire would take everything. She knew only that Emma had a school field trip today and she needed $5 for the deposit. She had $2.70 in her wallet. She counted it 3 times to be sure, as if the numbers might change if she concentrated hard enough. The apartment was small. A studio with a divider wall that created the illusion of 2 bedrooms. Michael had built that wall with his own hands before the children were born. His tools were still in a box in the closet. She had not touched them. Could not touch them. Touching them meant accepting that those hands would never build anything again. Emma slept on a twin bed pushed against the window. Lucas was in a portable crib that had cost $200 8 years ago and was now held together with duct tape at one corner. She moved quietly so as not to wake them. Their breathing filled the darkness. This was her favorite time of day. Before anyone was awake. Before the weight of it all pressed down. She dressed in the dark in the Venetian uniform. Black pants. White button-down shirt with a small stain near the collar that did not come out anymore no matter how many times she washed it. Black shoes with the hole in the sole. She pulled her hair back into a bun as tight as she could make it. Tight enough to hurt. That was the rule. Nothing could be loose or wild. Nothing could draw attention. The kitchen was 6 feet long. She made coffee in a machine that was 15 years old and sometimes did not turn on. Today it worked. She sat at the small table and opened her laptop, which was actually a tablet that ran slowly, and checked her bank account. $137. This was supposed to cover rent, food, school supplies, bus passes, and the medicine Emma took for asthma. The medicine cost $43 a month. Rent was $1,400. Nothing added up. Nothing had added up since Michael died. She opened the folder where she kept photographs. Michael at their wedding. Michael holding newborn Emma, tears on his face. Michael in the hospital the day before he died, trying to smile for the camera because she asked him to. She looked at that last photograph for 2 minutes, then closed the folder. This ritual was necessary, but it made her late. The day shift manager at the Venetian was named Brennan. He was 54 years old and had been divorced twice. He wore suits that cost more than her monthly rent. He had a gold watch that caught the light every time he moved his wrist. He had been the manager for 3 years, and in that time he had never once treated her like a human being. He treated her like an object that could be rearranged or discarded depending on his mood. When Mia arrived at the Venetian at 6 in the morning for her double shift, Harold was already in his office with the blinds closed. Through the glass, she could see him on the phone, his face red. He ended the call and opened the blinds and gestured for her to come in. His office smelled like expensive cologne and coffee. Everything in his office was expensive. The desk was mahogany. The chair was leather. The framed pictures on the wall showed him with celebrities and politicians. None of the pictures showed him smiling a real smile. "You're working the dinner service today," he said. Not hello. Not good morning. Just the assignment, delivered like an accusation. "I always work the dinner service," Mia said. Not today. Today you're covering for Jessica. She called in sick. Again. That means you're staying until midnight. Midnight was 5 hours longer than her normal shift. That was 5 hours longer that she would not be able to sleep. That was 5 hours that she would be on her feet in shoes with holes in the sole. That was 5 hours longer that Emma and Lucas would be at the after-school program, which cost extra. I need to pick up my children, she said. Harold looked at her for a long moment. His eyes were the color of wet concrete. Then you should have planned your life better, shouldn't you? Midnight. Don't be late, or don't come back. She left his office without speaking. She was very good at not speaking. It was a skill she had perfected over 2 years of survival. The fewer words you used, the less ammunition you gave people like Harold. The hotel lobby was all marble and chandeliers and the smell of money. Guests moved through it like they owned the building. Maybe they did. She had never asked. She moved through the space like a ghost, invisible, the way she had learned to be. At 11 o'clock that night, after serving 200 covers and having her tips reduced again because Harold said her service was slow, Mia stood in the break room and called Sister Margaret. There's been an emergency, she said. I'm going to be late picking up the children. Sister Margaret did not ask questions. She had worked with widows long enough to understand. They will be safe, she said. You do what you must. Those words were a kindness that Mia did not deserve. She worked until midnight exactly. Harold stood near the door when she clocked out and did not say goodbye. She did not expect him to. Outside, the summer night air was still warm. The thunderstorm had not yet arrived. The sky was clear and heavy with stars. She walked to the Red Line bus stop and waited for the last bus back to the shelter. It came at 12:28. She was the only passenger. What she did not know was that across the city, in a penthouse on the 40th floor, a man named Salvatore Conti was sitting in his wheelchair, staring at his phone. His son Micah had not come home from soccer practice. The coach had said the boy got picked up by his mother at 3 o'clock. But his mother had not picked him up. His mother had been dead for 6 years. Salvatore's hands were shaking. He had not been afraid of anything in 17 years. But he was afraid now. His lieutenant Rocco was making phone calls. His other lieutenant Nino was checking the hospitals. They were moving quietly, efficiently, the way trained men move when everything is falling apart. But Salvatore was not moving. He sat in the dark of his penthouse and held his son's empty soccer uniform in his lap and prayed to a God he had stopped believing in the day of his wedding. At 2:17 in the morning, Salvatore sent Rocco and Nino to the rain. They drove black SUVs through the flooded streets of Los Angeles, checking shelters, hospitals, parking lots, anywhere a frightened child might hide. Their radios crackled with reports that meant nothing. Dead ends. Wrong leads. Hours passing like years. And 6 miles away, in a diner called Morrison's, a young widow wrapped a shivering 6-year-old boy in her own coat and held him while he cried. She did not know his name yet. She did not know his father. She did not know that in holding this child, she was about to change everything. The fluorescent lights of First Community Bank hummed like a funeral dirge. Mia Harper stood at the marble counter, her hands trembling as she placed $34 in crumpled bills on the cold surface. 2 $10 bills. 3 5s. 4 1s. Every piece of paper represented a choice she had made: skip breakfast so her daughter Emma could eat, walk 5 miles instead of taking the bus, sell her wedding ring to a pawn shop on Figueroa Street for $70 that were already gone. The banker, a woman with sharp eyes and sharper lipstick, did not look up from her screen. The balance is $200,000, she said. Her voice was like a door slamming shut. Your minimum payment is due in 5 days. If we do not receive $5,000 by Friday at 5 p.m., we begin wage garnishment proceedings. Mia felt the number land inside her chest like a stone thrown into still water. 200,000. Michael's final hospital bills. The surgery that had bought him 3 more months of life. The months she had spent sleeping in hospital chairs, holding his hand while machines beeped around them, begging God for miracles that never came. "I understand," Mia whispered. She did not understand. She understood only that she had $34 and 5 days and no way on earth to close the gap between those two terrible facts. The banker slid the statement across the counter. Red numbers. Red warnings. Red ink drawing the line between survival and erasure. Mia folded the papers into her purse and turned to leave. "Miss Harper," the banker called. "The garnishment process is permanent until the debt is settled. It will come from every job you have. Every paycheck. Every shift." Mia nodded. She already knew. She had read the fine print at 2 in the morning when she could not sleep, sitting in the small bedroom she shared with Emma in a 1-bedroom apartment that was not hers anymore. The eviction notice had arrived 2 weeks earlier. 12 days remaining. 12 days until the landlord changed the locks. 12 days until she had nowhere to go but the women's shelter on 3rd Avenue where the rooms smelled like industrial cleaner and despair. She pushed through the heavy glass doors onto Olive Street. The afternoon heat pressed down like a physical weight. Los Angeles in late August was a furnace, the sky pale and bleached, the asphalt radiating warmth that made the air shimmer like a mirage. But to the west, something darker was gathering. Clouds were building on the horizon. Dark clouds. The kind that meant the heat was about to break, that the city's careful balance was about to shatter. Mia walked toward the bus stop. She had 45 minutes before she needed to be at the Venetian for her evening shift. Banquet server. 5 to 10 p.m. Then she would have an hour to get to Ruby's Diner for the graveyard shift. 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. Then home to shower and change into housekeeping clothes for the Venetian again at 6:45 a.m. 3 jobs. 3 shifts bleeding into each other like watercolors running together. She did not notice Harold Brennan following her until he was already beside her. He was 42 years old but looked 50. His face was the color of spoiled meat. His tie was stained with coffee. His breath, when he spoke, carried the smell of cigarettes and something darker, something like desperation mixed with cruelty, the way predators smell when they sense blood in the water. "Rough day at the bank?" he asked. Mia did not answer. She did not look at him. Harold Brennan was the day manager at the Venetian. He had hired her 6 months ago, the same week Michael died, when she had walked into his office in her best black dress with her eyes hollow and her voice steady and said, "I will work any shift you give me. I will work them all." He had said yes. Then he had started finding reasons to stand too close. To touch her shoulder. To find her alone in supply closets and stairwells. "I'm talking to you, Mia," he said. "That was a foreclosure notice you were carrying, wasn't it? I can see it from the way you're holding your purse. 200,000? That's a lot of debt for a woman in your position." "Stay away from me," Mia said. "I could help you," Harold said. His voice had changed. It was softer now, which made it more dangerous. "I could give you a raise. I could move you to day shifts only. No more night work. You could actually see your daughter. All you have to do is be nice to me. 1 night. 1 hotel room. I could forgive your entire payment arrangement at the Venetian." Mia stopped walking. The bus was 3 blocks away. She could see it stopped at the red light, 23 people pressed against the windows like prisoners in a cage. "No," she said. "No?" Harold laughed. It was the laugh of a man who was not used to hearing that word. "Do you understand what I'm offering? I could save you. I could." "You could leave me alone," Mia said. "That's what you could do." Harold's face went very still. The laugh stopped. What replaced it was something colder. Something that turned his eyes into the eyes of something that had never been human to begin with. "Then I'll make sure you lose everything," he said. His voice was level. "Certain." Like a man stating simple facts. You think you're special? You think your sob story means anything to me? Your dead husband? Your crying daughter? I'll have you fired by end of business tomorrow. I'll make sure you never work in this city again. And then we'll see how proud you are when you're sleeping on the street. He walked away before she could respond. He walked back toward the Venetian, his shadow stretching long across the pavement as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. Mia boarded the bus when it came. She sat in the back corner, her purse in her lap, her hand still shaking. Around her, Los Angeles moved on. People on their phones. Mothers with children. An old man reading a newspaper. No one looked at her. She was invisible. She had been invisible for so long that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to be seen. The bus moved through downtown, past buildings that cost more than she would earn in 10 lifetimes. Past restaurants where people sat at white tablecloth tables and ordered food she could not afford to look at. Past the Venetian, where the evening bellhops were already arriving in their pressed uniforms, ready to carry suitcases for people with somewhere to go. She got off at Spring Street and walked for blocks to the service entrance. The security guard, Marcus, who had always been kind to her, saw her coming and looked away. That was how quickly word traveled in places like this. Harold Brennan had already made calls. Already poisoned the well. The housekeeping supervisor, a woman named Donna, handed her a cart of supplies without meeting her eyes. "You're on the 32nd floor tonight," Donna said. 20 rooms. You have 6 hours. 20 rooms. 6 hours. That meant a room every 18 minutes. Bathrooms, mirrors, carpets, windows. Mia changed into her uniform, grey polyester that hung loose on her frame because she had lost 15 pounds in the months after Michael died and had not gained them back, and pushed the cart toward the service elevator. The elevator doors closed. She was alone. For 5 seconds, she was completely alone, and in those 5 seconds, her knees buckled. She leaned against the cold metal wall and let herself feel the full weight of it. $5,000. 12 days. $34. A daughter who kept asking, "When can we go home, Mommy?" A home that no longer belonged to her. The elevator doors opened on the 32nd floor. A couple emerged, laughing, the woman's hand on the man's chest, their room key glinting in the hallway light. They were going to dinner. They were in love. They had somewhere to be besides here. Mia pushed the cart to room 3201 and knocked. No answer. She used her key card. The door opened. The suite was enormous. Marble bathrooms. Floor-to-ceiling windows looking out at the city lights beginning to sparkle as evening fell. The bed was unmade. There was a bottle of champagne on the nightstand, empty. The woman had left her silk robe on the chair. Mia picked it up and thought about how much it probably cost. How many shifts? How many years? She folded it carefully and placed it on the bed and began to clean. 2 hours later, when she was finishing the 14th room, her vision started to blur. She had not eaten since yesterday morning. Half a sandwich left on a banquet table by someone who had not wanted it. She sat on the bathroom floor in room 3214 and let herself cry, but there were no tears left. Her body had dried up somewhere on a Greyhound bus 3 years ago, traveling toward a hospital where she would hold her husband's hand while he died. She finished the remaining 6 rooms. She made it to Ruby's Diner by 11 p.m. with 5 minutes to spare. Ruby's Diner sat on a corner of Alameda Street, a place that had not changed since 1987. The black and white checkered floor. The red vinyl booths with cracked seams leaking stuffing. The long counter with spinning chrome stools. The neon open sign in the window, the O and the E flickering irregularly, so it read pen and PN and sometimes nothing at all. Mia tied an apron around her waist and clocked in. There were 2 customers at midnight. A truck driver in booth 4. A man who might have been homeless sleeping in booth 6, his head against the window, his breathing deep and even. The storm was coming closer now. She could hear the thunder in the distance. Could smell the change in the air, something electric, something broken. At 1:27 in the morning, the door opened. A small boy stood in the doorway, soaked through. His clothes were plastered to his skin. His hair was dripping water into his eyes. He was shaking. He was 6 years old, maybe 7, with dark hair and dark eyes and a small face twisted in terror. Mia moved toward him without thinking. "Hey," she said softly, the way she had spoken to Emma when Emma was small and afraid. "Hey, sweetheart. Coming out of the rain. You're safe now." The boy looked at her. His teeth were chattering. He did not speak. Mia brought him inside and locked the door behind him. The storm was intensifying. The rain was not falling, it was being thrown at the windows like something with rage and purpose. "What's your name, honey?" Mia asked. "Micah," the boy whispered. She wrapped him in her own coat. It was the only warm thing she had. She held him while he shook and cried and told her, in fragments, that his soccer practice had ended and nobody came to pick him up and he got scared and he walked and walked and the rain came and he didn't know where he was. She did not know that across the city, in a penthouse on the 40th floor, a man in a wheelchair was praying to a God he had stopped believing in 17 years ago. She did not know that 2 black SUVs were moving through the flooded streets, searching. She did not know that in holding this child, she was about to change the trajectory of her entire life. She only knew that he was small and he was frightened and nobody else was going to save him. So she would. The rain came down like a blade wrapped in ice, tearing through the streets of Los Angeles at 3:17 in the morning. Mia Harper stood outside Ruby's diner, her thin jacket already soaked through, and watched the storm transform the world into something unrecognizable. The asphalt had become a river. The gutters overflowed. Lightning cracked the sky purple-white, and in that flash of light, she saw him. A small figure hunched at the bus stop across the street. Alone. No shelter. No adult. Just a child standing in water that reached his ankles, shaking so hard she could see it from 30 feet away. Mia didn't think. She ran. The water was cold and came up past her shins. Her work shoes, already worn thin at the heels, filled instantly. She splashed across the flooded street toward the bus stop, toward the small boy in the soaked school uniform, toward a child who had no business being outside at this hour, in this weather, without anyone to protect him. The boy looked up as she approached. 6 years old, maybe 7. Dark hair plastered to his forehead. Dark eyes wide with terror. His lips were blue from cold. "Hey, sweetheart," Mia said, kneeling down in the rain, water soaking through her pants at the knees. "What's your name, honey?" "Micah," the boy whispered. His teeth were chattering so hard she worried they might break. "Where's your mommy, Micah?" "Your dad." He just shook his head. Tears mixed with rainwater on his cheeks. Mia looked around the empty street. 3 in the morning in this neighborhood meant danger. Meant people who would see a child like this and use him. She made a decision the way she always made decisions about her own children, from her gut, from somewhere deeper than logic. Okay, we're going to go inside where it's warm. Can you hold my hand?" His small hand gripped hers like she was the only solid thing in a world falling apart. They hurried back across the flooded street toward Ruby's. Mia unlocked the diner door, pulled Micah inside, and locked it behind them immediately. The warmth hit them both like a benediction. The smell of coffee and grease hanging in the air had never smelled better. Mia wrapped the boy in her own coat, the only warm thing she owned, the coat she'd had for 3 winters, and guided him to the corner booth. His lips were still blue. His small body was still shaking. "Stay right here, okay? Don't move. I'm going to get you something warm." She moved behind the counter and made hot chocolate from the machine, using her own $1.50, the $1.50 she'd been saving for tomorrow's lunch. The brown liquid swirled into the paper cup, steam rising. She grabbed a plastic cup and some napkins and brought them back to the booth. Micah drank the hot chocolate in small, careful sips. His shaking began to slow. His breathing began to even out. Mia sat across from him and began to sing. An old lullaby. Something her mother had taught her when Mia was small and afraid of thunderstorms. Something that had soothed her own daughter Emma years ago, before life had taken everything. Her voice was soft, trembling like a candle in the wind, but steady. The rain continued to hammer against the windows. The lightning continued to split the sky. But inside the diner, in the corner booth, there was warmth and safety and a woman singing to a stranger's child like he was her own. Micah's eyes grew heavy. His head tilted to the side. He fell asleep against her shoulder, the empty hot chocolate cup resting in his small lap. Mia didn't move. She couldn't. This child needed her. This moment needed her. She sat in the corner booth of Ruby's diner at 3:42 in the morning, a small boy sleeping against her arm, and for the first time in months, she felt like her life had purpose. But what Mia did not know was this: across the city, in a penthouse on the 40th floor of a glass building that reflected the storm like dark water, a man in a wheelchair was losing his mind. Salvatore Conti was 47 years old. Grey eyes like winter fog. Black hair with silver at the temples. A face carved from marble and rage. He'd been paralyzed from the waist down 8 years ago when a rival family's shooter put a bullet through his spine. 8 years of moving through the world in a custom wheelchair, 8 years of men jumping at his slightest glance, 8 years of power that had stopped meaning anything the moment his son went missing. At 2:54 in the morning, his head of security Marco had suffered a massive cardiac event while driving Micah home from soccer practice. The car had crashed. Micah had run in panic. And Salvatore had spent the last 57 minutes screaming his son's name into a phone, mobilizing every resource he controlled, calling in every favor owed to him, turning Los Angeles upside down searching for a 6-year-old boy. 2 black SUVs pulled up outside Ruby's diner at 4:51 in the morning. A third vehicle arrived seconds later. The rear door of the first SUV opened, and Rocco emerged first, a man built like a boxer, with a scar running from his left eye to his cheekbone, moving with the careful precision of someone trained in violence. He was followed by Nino, thin and dangerous, his hand resting on the gun beneath his jacket. And then came Salvatore. His custom wheelchair was lifted from the vehicle by 2 attendants who moved with practiced efficiency. They set it on the pavement. Rocco and Nino formed a protective barrier around their boss as they approached the diner, rain soaking through their tailored suits that cost more than Mia's monthly rent multiplied by 12 months. The suits were Valentino. The watches were Rolex. The men beneath them were willing to kill. The diner door chimed as they entered. Mia's eyes snapped open. She'd been dozing, her head resting against Micah's, lost in the rhythm of the storm outside. 3 men in expensive, rain-soaked suits stood in the doorway of Ruby's diner. The one in the wheelchair had eyes like frozen steel. She knew immediately. The way Micah stirred, the way his eyes opened and suddenly came alive, she knew. "Daddy," Micah whispered. He sat up, reaching toward the man in the wheelchair. Salvatore wheeled forward, and for exactly 4 seconds, his entire face transformed. The marble mask cracked. His grey eyes softened. His jaw went slack. He looked like a man seeing his dead child resurrection. Rocco actually stepped backward. In 15 years of working for Salvatore Conti, Marco and Nino had never seen the boss show emotion. Not once. Not when his wife left him. Not when his business rival was found hanging from a meat hook. Not ever. But they saw it now. Salvatore reached his son and pulled Micah into his arms, holding him so tightly that the boy gasped. His eyes closed. His shoulders trembled. When he opened them again, he looked directly at Mia Harper. "You found my son," he said. His voice was rough, abraded from screaming. Mia stood on shaking legs. He was alone in the storm. "I couldn't just leave him." Salvatore studied her with an intensity that made her want to run. The worn waitress uniform. The name tag that said MIA. The dark circles under her eyes so deep they looked like bruises. The hands red and cracked from years of labor. The coat wrapped around Micah that was clearly the only warm thing she owned. "What's your name?" Salvatore asked. "Mia Harper." "You work here?" "Here and 2 other places." Something passed across Salvatore's face like a shadow. He wheeled closer to her, close enough that she could smell the expensive cologne mixing with rainwater. Close enough to notice the scar that ran from above his right eye to his cheekbone, white and thin and terrible. "Thank you," Salvatore said, and the words sounded like he was dragging them from his chest with hooks. "You saved him." Mia nodded, unable to speak. Rocco watched his boss wheel toward the door, Micah wrapped around his neck. He watched the way Salvatore looked back at the waitress one more time before disappearing into the rain. And in that glance, Rocco understood something fundamental: everything had changed. The storm continued outside. The rain continued to fall. And Mia Harper stood alone in Ruby's diner, wondering what it meant that a man like that now knew her name. But the next morning would bring a choice that would test everything. Because Harold Brennan, the manager of the Venetian hotel where she worked double shifts, had heard rumors. And Victoria Ashford, the elegant front desk manager with her designer heels and her cruel smile, had a talent for spreading lies like poison through water. Mia didn't know yet that her world was about to collapse. She only knew that for one moment, in a diner at 4 in the morning, she had mattered to someone. And that moment, somehow, was going to change everything. The rain fell harder now, cold and violent, and Mia Harper's hands shook as she gripped the steel railing of the 4th Street Bridge. 11:34 at night. The Los Angeles River churned below her like something alive, swollen from the summer storm, dark water rushing toward the ocean with nowhere else to go. She understood that feeling perfectly. $3 remained in her pocket. 3. After 12 years of working, after every double shift and skipped meal and borrowed coat, $3 was all that separated her from nothing. The shelter had turned her away that evening, overcrowded, they said, try back tomorrow, and she could not put Emma and Lucas through another night in the car. So she had parked at St. Catherine's, whispered a prayer she no longer believed in, and told her children Mommy needed to take a walk. The wind tore through the canyon like a blade wrapped in ice. Everything had collapsed in 9 hours. 9 hours from the moment Harold Brennan's office had become a courtroom without mercy. The police officers had stood like monuments, their uniforms pressing down the air, and Harold had smiled behind them with the expression of a man who had already won. "Mia Harper, you're under investigation for identity fraud," the taller officer had said, his voice flat and official. The word seemed to belong to someone else's life, someone else's crime. Victoria Ashford had stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown. That smile. That cruel, perfect smile that had rehearsed this moment in the mirror 100 times. "We have documentation that you falsified your work visa," the officer continued, pulling a folder from his briefcase. Pages of forged documents. Pages of lies wrapped in official language. Mia's voice had come out small, broken already. "That's a lie. I was born in California. My birth certificate should have been nicer to me, Mia," Harold had interrupted, stepping closer. His cologne made her stomach turn. "Now you'll lose your kids too when Child Services hears about this. Immigration fraud? Child abandonment through negligence? You think you're keeping those kids? The state will take them faster than you can cry." The officers had escorted her through the lobby. Every eye had turned. Every whisper had started. She had felt it happening in real time, the shift from invisible to visible, but only as something shameful, something criminal, something to be feared and avoided. Victoria's voice had carried across the marble like a bell announcing death. "See everyone? I told you she was a criminal. I always knew something was wrong with her." 3 hours in a police station. 3 hours of fingerprints and questions and the certainty that her life was ending. Then the birth certificate had come through, signed and sealed by the state of California 42 years ago, and the officers had exchanged a look and released her with something like apology in their eyes. But the apology meant nothing. The damage was absolute. Every employer in Los Angeles had been called. That was how these things worked. A manager's whispered warning. A reputation destroyed before she could even apply. Child Protective Services had opened a file, just routine, they said, just a routine investigation regarding the care and stability of the children. Routine. As if her entire world was routine. The railing was cold beneath her palms. Her clothes were soaked through. The rain plastered her hair to her face and neck, and she did not wipe it away. Why bother? Everything was wet now. Everything was drowning. She thought about Michael, about the way his hand had felt in hers at the hospital, about the last words he had spoken, "Take care of them." Promise me. She had promised. She had kept that promise for 4 years, working herself down to bone and breath, and it had not been enough. Nothing was ever enough. The system was designed to break people like her, people with nothing, people with no connections, people with no one to call when the world decided to crush them. Emma and Lucas were sleeping in the car at St. Catherine's parking lot. Emma was 7 now, old enough to understand that something was wrong. She had cried when the officers came to the hotel. She had cried in the police station waiting room. She had cried in the car when Mia told her they would have to stay at the church for a few more nights. Lucas was 5. Lucas still believed his mother could fix anything. The water below was fast and dark and final. One foot moved closer to the edge. Then the other. Mia stood at the precipice and thought, maybe they would be better off without her. Maybe the state would find them a real home, a family with stability and money and a father figure, the kind of life she could never give them. Maybe her drowning would be the gift that finally freed them. Her hands loosened their grip on the railing. The phone in her pocket buzzed at 11:40 p.m. A text from Emma's borrowed phone at the shelter. "Mom, where are you? Lucas had a bad dream and wants you. Please come back. I love you." 4 words. I love you. Mia collapsed against the railing and sobbed into the rain, her body breaking open like a dam, but her legs carried her backward, away from the edge, back toward the stairs, back toward her children. She walked through the darkness and the rain, her heart shattered but her arms still reaching for them, still moving, still fighting, still refusing to stop. She did not know that Salvatore's men had been watching her all day. She did not know that Rocco had called his boss at 11:36 p.m. when she stepped onto the bridge, that Salvatore had listened on the phone in his dark penthouse for 4 minutes, silent and still as a monument, until Rocco's voice came through, "She's leaving the bridge. She's going back to the car." She did not know that Salvatore sat in darkness for 3 more minutes after that call ended, his hands gripping the wheels of his chair so tightly his knuckles turned white, and that in that darkness he made a decision that would reshape the entire city. Justice began at 2:51 a.m. 12 men in black tactical gear moved like ghosts through the streets of Sherman Oaks. They approached Harold Brennan's house in silence, no sirens, no warnings, no mercy. The security system was disabled in 18 seconds. The back door opened without sound. Harold Brennan woke to the feeling of cold metal pressed against his forehead and Nino's smile inches from his face. What is this?" Harold screamed, his body thrashing against the bedsheets, his voice cracking like a boy's voice. Rocco pulled him from the bed, Harold in his underwear, trembling like a cornered animal. His skin was pale and soft, the skin of a man who had never worked with his hands, never suffered, never understood consequence. "You hurt someone you shouldn't have," Rocco said, his voice flat and calm, which was somehow more terrifying than any shout. "Who?" "I'll pay." Harold's voice had become a whimper. "I have money. Whatever you want, I have money." "The woman you destroyed," Rocco continued. "Mia Harper." Harold's face went white. The blood drained from his cheeks and lips until he looked like a corpse trying to remember how to speak. "I didn't, she's nobody." The words fell out of his mouth like stones. Nino leaned down until his lips were inches from Harold's ear. "She saved Salvatore Contu's son. That makes her everything. And you tried to take her children. They dragged him through the back door, into the waiting darkness, into a black van with tinted windows. His screams were muffled by the sound of the closing door and the rain beginning again. At that same hour, at 2:51 a.m., Victoria Ashford was arrested at her Brentwood condo by 12 federal agents. This was not Salvatore's hand, this was something more permanent. This was the machinery of law enforcement, moving with the weight of evidence and protocol and federal authority. Victoria was pulled from her bed in silk pajamas, her wrists snapped into cuffs, her voice rising to a scream, "Do you know who I am? Do you understand what you're doing?" The agents did not answer. They were reading her rights, photographing her, leading her out into the pre-dawn darkness where news cameras flashed and recorded. By morning, every screen in Los Angeles would show Victoria Ashford's face, the elegant manager, the woman everyone had admired, transformed into something else entirely. The news would report that Victoria had been running an immigration fraud scheme for 6 years. Selling fake documents. Blackmailing vulnerable workers. Stealing $3 million from people who had nothing. Every text message, every forged signature, every victim compiled into a federal case by an anonymous source who had sent everything to the FBI with a single note attached: she tried to destroy an innocent mother. Salvatore had arranged all of it. His network had gathered every piece of evidence, every thread of her crimes, and handed it to the federal government wrapped in a bow. The arrest would be her destruction. 40 years in federal prison. Her family's name destroyed. Her face the definition of public shame. But Harold Brennan would not see a prison cell. Harold Brennan would be handed to the Moretti family, Salvatore's rivals, along with evidence that Harold had been skimming money from the Venetian hotel, money the Morettis used for their own purposes. The Morettis would take him to the desert. He would never be seen again, and the whispers, when they came weeks later, would speak of screaming that lasted for hours. Too quick would have been too easy. Too merciful. Salvatore wanted him to understand, in his final moments, what it meant to destroy a mother. Rain continued to fall across the city. In a church parking lot, Mia Harper climbed into the back seat of her car and held her children while they slept, her arms wrapped around them, her heart still beating, still fighting, still refusing to break completely. She did not yet know that everything had changed. She only knew that her children were safe beside her, that she was alive, and that somehow, impossibly, she would find a way forward. The morning would bring the news she had been waiting for her entire life. But that moment had not yet arrived. The morning light filtered through the car windows in pale strips. Mia Harper woke to the sound of her son's breathing, steady and slow, his small body pressed against her side. Emma lay curled in the front passenger seat, one hand dangling toward the floor. 3 days in this car. 3 days of counting the money they did not have, of rationing the water in the gallon jug, of teaching her children that home could be anywhere as long as they were together. She reached for the envelope on the dashboard where the eviction notice had lived, the one with red ink screaming across the page, 12-day deadline, final notice. Her hand touched empty air. The notice was gone. In its place sat a cream-colored envelope, thick and expensive, sealed with a wax stamp. Her heart stopped. Her hands trembled as she broke the seal and pulled out a single sheet of paper written in careful, deliberate handwriting. "You saved my son. Let me save you. The deed is enclosed. The house is yours. All yours. SC?" Below the letter lay papers. Property documents. A 3-bedroom house in Boyle Heights, fully paid, in her name alone. Mia Harper. The woman with $34 and a shattered life now owned a home. She sat there for 8 minutes without moving, the papers pressed against her chest, her mouth open but silent. Then she cried. Not the small, quiet tears she had learned to cry in the dark so the children would not wake. These were the sobs of someone who had been holding water back for so long it broke through every wall she had built, and she cried until her ribs hurt, until Emma woke up asking if Mommy was okay, and Mia could only nod and whisper, "Yes, baby. Yes. Everything is okay now." She drove to the address before the sun climbed higher. The house sat on a quiet street lined with old oak trees, a white fence marking the property line. The gate opened when she touched it. Inside, the yard was green and watered. The front door had a key in an envelope taped to the frame. Inside, the house exhaled like a living thing. Furniture filled every room, not luxury, not trying to be something it was not, just solid pieces that said home. A kitchen table. A sofa. Beds with clean sheets and pillows. In the refrigerator, milk, cheese, bread, eggs, fruit. Lucas found the pantry first and stood there staring at the shelves lined with canned food, cereal, rice, beans, oil. He turned to his mother with his eyes wide and said, "Mommy, is this real?" Emma ran through the room screaming, her voice bouncing off walls she could now call hers. She claimed the smaller bedroom upstairs, the one with yellow paint and white curtains. Lucas wanted the one with the window seat. Mia stood in the largest bedroom, the master bedroom, for her, for the first time in her life, and looked at the emptiness of her own space and felt something ancient crack open inside her chest. A room of her own. A bed of her own. Walls that were hers. She cried again, but this time her children came and held her, and she held them back, and they sat on the bare mattress together while the afternoon light moved across the floor like a promise. At 3 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Mia's entire body went rigid. She knew, before she looked, who it would be. She walked to the door slowly, her children quiet behind her, and when she opened it, Salvatore Conti stood in his wheelchair on her porch, dressed in a dark suit, his eyes carrying the weight of 1,000 private wars. "I wanted to see if the house was as you imagined it," he said quietly, his voice like stone settling. "May I come in?" She stepped aside. He rolled past her into the living room, and Mia closed the door and called to Emma and Lucas, told them to play in the backyard, stay where she could see them through the window. They left, casting curious glances at the man in the expensive suit, and then it was just Salvatore and Mia in the space that now belonged to her because he had decided it should. "Why?" she asked, and her voice shattered on the single word. He did not answer immediately. He looked around the room as if seeing something beyond the walls, something written in the air, in the light, in the dust motes floating between them. When he finally spoke, his words came slowly, each one precise, each one carrying weight. 17 years ago, I waited at the altar of San Antonio Cathedral, he said. 300 people in the pews. I was 30 years old. I had already lived a dozen lifetimes by then, already been shot, already survived things that would have broken a man made of less steel. But I had never been abandoned. Mia sat down. She did not ask him to continue. He would tell her, or he would not, and either way she would listen. Her name was Isabella Russo, Salvatore continued. Daughter of a family from the south side. Our marriage was supposed to unite territories, settle a war that had been burning for 3 years. Her father had promised her. Our families had signed papers. The church was cold, it was November, and the November wind tore through Los Angeles like a blade wrapped in ice. I waited at the altar. The priest waited. 300 people sat in silence, and I waited. He looked at his hands, these hands that had ordered the destruction of empires, that had signed death sentences with a nod, and they were trembling. 40 minutes, he said. I waited 40 minutes. Then her father stood up. He walked to the microphone. He announced that she had run away. With another man. A man who could walk. A man who was whole. The silence that fell across the room was total. Even the refrigerator stopped humming. The whispers started immediately, Salvatore said. I could hear them even though people were trying to be quiet. Poor Salvatore. She couldn't stand to marry a cripple. What man would have her anyway, now that she has damaged him like this? I sat in that wheelchair and listened to 300 people whisper about my manhood, about my worth, about how even a woman who was supposed to be contractual obligated to marry me could not bring herself to do it. The whole room went silent after that. Everyone left. The priest left. My own men looked at me like I was a corpse they had to carry out. He turned to face her completely, and in his eyes she saw the ghost of the 30-year-old man who had sat alone in a church and felt the world decide he was not enough. That night, I made a decision, he continued. I decided that I would never trust anyone again. Never be vulnerable. Never let anyone close enough to hurt me. I would build something so powerful that no one would dare touch me, and if they did, I would teach them what it meant to challenge Salvatore Conti. I built my empire on that night. I built it on the decision to never need anyone ever again. He reached across the table toward her, but did not touch. His hand stayed suspended in the space between them, open, waiting. Then you wrapped my son in your coat when you had nothing, he said. You did not know who he was. You did not know who I was. You did not care about any of it. You only cared that a child was cold and alone and afraid. You saw him, and you gave him the only thing you had, yourself. You saved him that night. But you also saved me the same night you saved him, and you did not even know it. You showed me that the worst night of a person's life does not have to be the end of their story. Mia's hand moved slowly, like it belonged to someone else, someone braver. She placed her palm against his, and they sat like that, two people who had been drowning, now holding onto each other in water too deep for either of them to touch bottom. You saved me too, she whispered. Last night, sitting in that car, I couldn't see a way forward anymore. I couldn't see how to keep fighting. I was ready to let go. And then this morning, I found your gift, and it gave me hope again. You gave me back my tomorrow. They did not speak after that. There was nothing left to say that their hands could not communicate better. Outside, the oak trees moved in the wind. Inside, two people who had learned the world's cruelty sat in their separate catastrophes and chose, together, not to let catastrophe have the final word. When Salvatore left, an hour later, he paused at the door and said something so quietly she almost missed it. I did not know that love would feel like coming home to a person instead of a place. 6 months later, the diner where everything began still smelled like coffee and grease and possibility. Mia worked there part-time now, managing the morning shift at a hotel Salvatore owned, but she came back to Ruby's diner every Friday evening just to sit in that same corner booth. Tonight, Salvatore sat across from her, his wheelchair at the end of the table where it did not obstruct the aisle. At another booth, Micah, Emma, and Lucas shared a triple chocolate milkshake with 3 spoons, their voices bright and unconcerned, the voices of children who knew they would be safe when they went to sleep. Do you ever regret the life you live? Mia asked, stirring sugar into her coffee. The empire? The things you have done. Salvatore considered this the way he considered everything, with the weight of a man who understood that words, once spoken, could never be unmade. Every day, he said finally. Every single day, I think about the people hurt by what I have built, and I carry that weight. But I do not regret finding you. I do not regret the choice to let you teach me that I am worth saving. They were not married. The world was not ready for that, and Salvatore's world was too dangerous to ever fully invite her into its center. But what they had built from the wreckage of their separate catastrophes was something stronger than marriage. It was recognition. Two people who had lost everything and chosen, together, to begin again. Sometimes the people who save us are the people who need saving too. Sometimes love is not about fixing broken things but about standing together in the ruins and choosing to rebuild anyway. Harold Brennan would spend 40 years in a federal prison, his crimes finally catching up with him in a holding cell where no one knew his name. Victoria Ashford would spend the rest of her life watching the world she had built crumble, public shame following her everywhere like a shadow. They had learned that cruelty has consequences, that the powerless are not always alone, that darkness does not always win. Mia learned that accepting help is not weakness, that she is stronger than she knew, that her children will remember not the night she almost broke but the morning she chose to keep fighting. And Salvatore learned that the worst night of his life, abandoned and humiliated, was not the end of his story but the beginning of becoming someone worth saving. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only love can do that. If this story moved you, hit subscribe right now. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling us what you felt. Tomorrow we have another story that will break your heart and put it back together. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. We will see you again in the next video.